At a high-end party packed with the nation's elite, a merciless billionaire did the unthinkable. He threw a black employee into a piranha-infested pool. And the guests? They didn't help. They filmed it like it was a show. The world had seen cruelty before, but never like this. Live, champagne in hand, a woman fighting for her life while the elite laughed and recorded every second. Then something incredible happened. The video went viral. Overnight, she became a symbol of courage and defiance, inspiring millions with the most unbelievable comeback ever. So, where are you watching from? And if this story gives you chills, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow I've got something even more shocking for you. Now, let's get into her amazing journey. The crowd cheered and laughed as the billionaire leaned over the edge of the pool, his designer shoes glinting under the party lights. "Let's see how brave you really are," he sneered, shoving the maid into the water. She hit the surface with a loud splash, and immediately, the piranhas started circling, their tiny teeth glinting like razor blades in the glittering water. The elite guests raised their phones, capturing every second, expecting the woman to scream and flail. What they didn't know was that they had underestimated her completely. She surfaced just enough to take a steady breath, her dark eyes scanning the water with precision. She had survived situations far worse than this, and she had learned the art of patience and strategy in a world that had always tried to break her. While the guests laughed and the billionaire gloated, she moved beneath the surface with calculated grace, adjusting her position so the fish swirled around her but never struck. Every movement was deliberate, every pause a silent challenge. The billionaire waved his arms, urging the piranhas to attack, a sadistic grin plastered across his face. "Come on, fight for your life," he shouted. The guests laughed, the sound mixing with the clinking of champagne glasses, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. Pride and cruelty had blinded the billionaire. He didn't see the shift in power happening beneath him. Then, in a move that stunned everyone, the maid pushed off the pool floor with one powerful kick. The piranhas scattered slightly, and in a single fluid motion, she swam to the edge, grabbed a hidden ledge, and hoisted herself up. The billionaire, leaning too far over to watch her struggle, lost his balance. His expensive suit was soaked as he flailed, arms grasping at nothing. The wood railing creaked and snapped, sending him toppling into the water with a splash far bigger than hers. Panic replaced his arrogance in an instant. The guests gasped and recoiled, some still filming, but now with a hint of fear in their voices. He struggled, spluttering and choking, as the piranhas darted closer to the new, unsteady presence. The tables had turned in a heartbeat, and for the first time, the billionaire was the one fighting for his life. The maid remained calm, watching him with a mixture of pity and resolve. She extended her hand toward him, not as an act of mercy, but as a lesson. "Do you want mercy?" she asked, her voice steady, carrying a weight that made him freeze. His pride, which had ruled his life, offered no response but a desperate nod. For the first time, he felt powerless, stripped of wealth, status, and arrogance. This wasn't just about survival. The maid's journey had been shaped by years of adversity. She had arrived at the billionaire's estate as a young woman with nothing, navigating a world where the powerful treated everyone else as disposable. She had seen the cruelty he inflicted on others, on staff, on children, on anyone who dared defy him. And she had learned, quietly, patiently, how to survive. And now, finally, she had the opportunity to deliver justice in a way that could not be ignored. With a swift, precise motion, she helped him to the pool's edge, keeping her grip firm. "Remember this feeling," she said softly, "because this is what you made everyone else feel." Humiliation and fear mixed with shock in his eyes. The guests, who had watched in amused detachment minutes before, now whispered among themselves, stunned by the reversal. No one dared speak. The lesson had been delivered. As he stumbled out of the pool, dripping and shivering, she straightened, her expression calm, almost regal. She didn't revel in cruelty. She believed in justice. But she had shown him that power without compassion was meaningless. Around her, the staff who had long suffered in silence now looked at her with newfound respect. She had changed the rules, not with money or threats, but with courage, intelligence, and the ability to endure what most people could not even imagine. That night, the maid didn't just survive. She became a legend in her own right, a symbol of defiance and bravery. And for the billionaire, the pool he had designed to humiliate others became the place where he learned a lesson he would never forget. Arrogance can drown you, even if you think you control the world. The video of that night spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with hashtags praising her courage, calling out the billionaire's cruelty, and sharing every shocking frame. Overnight, the maid went from being invisible in a world of glittering elites to a symbol of resistance and bravery. Everywhere she turned, people recognized her, cheered for her, and even news channels wanted interviews. She hadn't sought fame. She had sought justice, but now the world was her audience, and her story was unstoppable. Meanwhile, the billionaire's world crumbled. His reputation, once untouchable, was shredded in the court of public opinion. Sponsors pulled out of partnerships, business associates distanced themselves, and his social media accounts became battlegrounds of criticism and outrage. He tried to laugh it off, tried to show bravado at other parties, but inside, he knew he had underestimated her, and the humiliation gnawed at him day and night. No one had ever dared challenge him so openly, and now everyone could see him for the cruel, arrogant man he really was. For the maid, however, the newfound attention brought complications. Some admired her, but others envied or resented her courage. She received messages from strangers, some thanking her, others warning her to be careful. Her life had changed, and yet, she remained grounded. She continued working at the mansion, but now with a quiet sense of purpose. Every movement, every decision was strategic. She had learned that survival was about patience, intelligence, and timing, and she was ready for whatever came next. The billionaire, desperate to regain control, plotted behind closed doors. He tried to humiliate her again, to trap her in a way that would restore his dominance, but she was always one step ahead. Every plan he conceived, she anticipated. His attempts to intimidate her with threats, lawsuits, and false accusations failed spectacularly. People sided with her. They had seen the viral video, and the world now knew who the real villain was. One afternoon, he tried to corner her in the mansion's grand hall. "You think you're clever," he hissed, his face twisted with anger. "But I can ruin you." She smiled faintly, her calm demeanor unnerving him. "You already tried, didn't you?" she replied. "And look where that got you." He froze, realizing she wasn't just surviving. She was controlling the narrative, turning every attack back on him. But the story didn't stop there. The maid had more than courage. She had ingenuity. She discovered hidden accounts, secret dealings, and shady practices the billionaire had engaged in for years. Slowly, she gathered evidence, careful not to be noticed, planning her moves with precision. What the billionaire thought was a powerless servant was actually a master strategist, and soon, the evidence she collected would shake him to the core. In the meantime, the public continued to rally behind her. Online, she became a symbol of resilience. Motivational speakers referenced her story, schools highlighted her bravery and lessons about courage and justice, and journalists covered her journey as an example of standing up to tyranny. She had not only survived a life-threatening ordeal, but had transformed it into a beacon of hope for millions. The billionaire's frustration grew with each passing day. He couldn't touch her legally, couldn't intimidate her publicly, and couldn't silence the world watching. The more desperate he became, the more reckless his actions turned. He began to lash out at employees, making mistakes that even the smallest observer could notice. He had underestimated the power of one courageous person, and now his empire was cracking at the edges. Then came the turning point. The maid discovered a hidden safe in the billionaire's office, filled with documents proving corruption, tax evasion, and illegal dealings that could destroy him entirely. She realized that this was her chance, not for revenge, but to ensure justice. She planned carefully, waiting for the perfect moment to expose the truth without putting herself at risk. Every step she took was calculated, every move deliberate, and every second heightened the suspense. The elite parties, the cameras, the viral fame, it had all been preparation. People had watched her fight the piranhas. Now they would watch her dismantle the empire of a man who thought he could play God. And this time, there would be no mercy for cruelty, no hiding behind wealth or status. The world was watching, and she was ready. Meanwhile, the billionaire's arrogance continued to blind him. He failed to notice the growing scrutiny from authorities, journalists, and even former allies. He believed that power was eternal, that money could erase mistakes, and that fear could silence anyone. But he was wrong. One courageous woman had turned the tables completely, and now every decision he made pushed him closer to a reckoning he could not escape. As night fell over the mansion, she stood by the window, reflecting on how far she had come. The viral video had changed everything, but it had also tested her resolve. She had survived death, faced public scrutiny, and maneuvered through a world built to crush people like her. And now, the final act was approaching. A confrontation that would determine not just her fate, but the fate of the man who had once thrown her into a piranha pool without a second thought. The audience, millions online, waited in suspense, knowing that something incredible was about to happen. And as the maid prepared her next move, she understood that courage was not just about surviving. It was about seizing the moment, turning fear into power, and proving that no one, not even a billionaire, was untouchable. The mansion was quiet that morning, almost eerily so. The billionaire, still smarting from the viral humiliation, paced like a caged animal. His luxurious home, once a palace of control and power, now felt like a trap. Every glance he cast at the staff reminded him of the maid's defiance, the one person who had turned his world upside down. He had tried everything to regain dominance, but the more he lashed out, the more the walls of his empire seemed to close in. Meanwhile, the maid moved through the mansion with quiet precision. Every step she took was measured, every glance intentional. She had spent days studying the billionaire's habits, the security systems, and the hidden corners of the estate. The safe she had discovered wasn't just a box of documents. It was the key to exposing the man who had treated people like pawns. And she knew the moment to act had to be perfect. That afternoon, the billionaire called for a private meeting in his office. He believed he could intimidate her once again, assuming that fear could still bend her will. But she entered calmly, holding nothing, showing no sign of worry. His eyes narrowed. "You think you can outsmart me?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. She didn't answer. Instead, she placed her hands on the desk, letting him stew in his own uncertainty. "You've embarrassed me in front of everyone," he spat. "Do you know what I could do to you?" She leaned slightly forward, her eyes cold and unwavering. "You've already done it," she replied softly. "But I survived. And now, it's your turn to face the consequences." The words hit him like a thunderclap. He had expected threats, apologies, or excuses, but not this calm certainty. Later that night, the maid made her move. She slipped quietly into the office when the billionaire had stepped out to answer a call, his guard still dangerously low. With careful hands, she unlocked the safe, revealing stacks of documents, photographs, and digital drives detailing illegal dealings, offshore accounts, and secret schemes designed to exploit the very people he had once scorned. She took pictures, copied files, and organized evidence with meticulous care. Every detail she gathered was a dagger aimed at the heart of his empire, and she knew exactly how to use it. The billionaire returned, sensing something was off. He stopped dead in the doorway, seeing her at the safe. Rage flared across his face, but she didn't flinch. "What are you doing?" he barked. "This is mine. How dare you?" She closed the safe gently, turning to face him fully. "This isn't just yours anymore," she said. "Everything you've hidden, every secret, every person you've hurt, it's coming out. And you have no one to blame but yourself." He lunged, but she stepped aside, agile and calm, letting his weight carry him past. He stumbled, stunned, and for the first time, realized that his wealth and status meant nothing in that moment. Power wasn't about money. It was about action, intelligence, and courage. And she had all three in abundance. By the next morning, the evidence had spread across news channels, social media, and even international outlets. The billionaire's assets were frozen, investigations launched, and every scandal documented. Headlines screamed about his arrogance, cruelty, and crimes, with images of the viral pool incident front and center. The public watched, riveted, as the woman they had cheered for took control of a story that seemed almost cinematic in its drama. The billionaire's desperation grew. He tried to call in favors, threaten former associates, and even bribe officials, but nothing worked. Every move was countered by the evidence she had released, the public outrage she had mobilized, and her uncanny ability to stay one step ahead. His empire, built on intimidation and manipulation, was collapsing around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Meanwhile, the maid wasn't content with just exposing him. She wanted to make sure justice was served in a way that would protect others from his cruelty. She coordinated with authorities, ensured witnesses were ready, and meticulously tracked every angle of his business dealings. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a strategist, a hero, and a symbol of relentless determination. Then came the final confrontation. The billionaire, cornered and humiliated, faced her one last time in his own mansion. His eyes were wild, his voice shaking. "You don't know what you're doing. You can't ruin me." She stood tall, calm, and unwavering. "I've already survived what you thought would kill me. You don't get to scare me anymore. The truth is stronger than your lies, and justice is stronger than your arrogance." He tried one last desperate move, lunging toward her, but security, now loyal to the truth rather than fear, restrained him. The piranha pool, once a symbol of his cruelty, now stood as a silent witness to his downfall. He sank into the realization that his life of power and dominance had been shattered, not by wealth, but by courage, intellect, and unwavering morality. The maid walked out of the mansion that night, greeted by reporters, fans, and the staff who had once feared for their jobs. She had turned the tables completely. A woman who had been treated like disposable property was now a figure of strength and inspiration. The billionaire's empire was crumbling, his reputation ruined, and the world had seen the triumph of justice over cruelty. Her journey didn't end there. The story of the piranha pool, the viral video, and her ultimate victory spread across continents. People wrote books, created documentaries, and shared her story in classrooms, showing that courage could not be silenced, that one person could indeed change the course of events, and that no amount of money or status could protect those who preyed on the vulnerable. By the end, she had not only survived, but had risen to a legendary status. The billionaire, once untouchable, was now a cautionary tale. And the maid, standing in the evening sunlight outside the mansion, smiled quietly. She had turned fear into power, danger into strategy, and cruelty into justice. And the world had witnessed every moment. The morning after the world saw the billionaire's empire crumble, the mansion was quieter than ever. The piranha pool, once a place of terror, now sat still, almost symbolic of the man's fallen power. The maid moved through the estate with a quiet confidence, her presence no longer just that of a servant, but of someone whose courage had shaken an entire system. She wasn't seeking accolades, but the world seemed determined to give them to her anyway. News channels covered her story endlessly. Headlines read, "From victim to victor, the maid who took down a billionaire, and courage in the face of cruelty. Viral heroine inspires millions." Social media exploded with support, interviews, and even fan art. People shared the footage, discussed the tactics she used to survive, and praised her for turning fear into power. She had become a symbol of resilience, a living testament that one person could take on the richest, most arrogant individual and win. Despite the attention, she remained grounded. She continued working at the mansion, not because she needed the money, but because she wanted to oversee the billionaire's downfall with her own eyes. Every day brought new developments, federal investigators, legal teams, and journalists swarming the estate. She guided them, providing evidence, sharing insights, and ensuring the process was fair but thorough. Every move she made kept him on edge, and the once arrogant man realized just how powerless he had become. The billionaire tried everything: private lawyers, secret meetings, even bribes, but it was too late. His attempts to regain control only drew more attention, and the public grew more outraged with each revelation of his corruption and cruelty. Meanwhile, the maid had become a master of strategy. She had learned to anticipate his moves, counter his schemes, and stay 3 steps ahead at all times. Her calm composure in the face of his desperation only made him flail more. Outside the mansion, she began to receive invitations. Universities wanted her to speak about courage and ethics. NGOs and charities reached out, inspired by her story of survival and justice. She wasn't seeking fame, but she realized she could use her platform to help others who were vulnerable and oppressed. People from all walks of life now looked up to her, not just as a survivor, but as a leader, a strategist, and a beacon of hope. Back inside the mansion, the billionaire grew increasingly paranoid. Every glance at her reminded him of the viral pool incident. Every conversation with staff made him realize how exposed he was, and every news headline was a fresh blow to his pride. He was no longer the untouchable man he had believed himself to be. He had underestimated not only her courage, but also her intelligence, her patience, and her determination. Then came the moment that would cement her legacy. She organized a public hearing with all the evidence she had collected, ensuring transparency and justice. Authorities, journalists, and the elite attendees who had once laughed at the pool incident watched as the billionaire was confronted with the truth in a formal setting. Every illegal deal, every exploitative action, and every act of cruelty was laid bare. The room, once a place of power and arrogance, now held a man reduced to desperation, forced to answer for his actions in front of the world. The billionaire's attempts to charm or intimidate failed spectacularly. He realized that no amount of money or influence could erase what had been done, and the viral video of the pool incident had ensured that the world remembered every humiliating moment. The maid, standing tall and composed, felt a strange mix of satisfaction and solemnity. She had never wanted vengeance, only justice, and tonight, justice had been delivered. Outside the mansion, crowds gathered. People celebrated her courage, shared her story online, and praised her for standing up to cruelty. She became a symbol not just of survival, but of empowerment. Stories of her bravery were discussed in classrooms, on social media, and in households across the nation. She had taken an act of horror and turned it into a movement, proving that even in the face of unimaginable danger, one person could make a difference. Even as the billionaire's empire continued to collapse, the maid's life changed in quieter, more profound ways. She began mentoring young women, teaching them self-defense, confidence, and resilience. She used her platform to highlight injustices and support those who had no voice. Her rise from fear to power inspired millions, and her calm, strategic approach became a blueprint for anyone facing oppression. At night, she would sometimes stand by the pool, the same one that had once held danger and death. The water was calm now, reflecting the moonlight, a reminder of what had happened and how far she had come. She didn't feel hatred. She felt strength, clarity, and a sense of purpose. The billionaire, once arrogant and cruel, was now a shadow of the man he used to be, and the world had witnessed every step of his downfall. Her story had gone viral, but it was more than that. It had become legendary. Courage, strategy, and resilience had triumphed over arrogance, cruelty, and power. She had survived, she had fought back, and she had turned fear into action. And for everyone watching, her journey was a reminder that even the most impossible challenges could be overcome with determination, intelligence, and a refusal to be silenced. The world had watched, shared, and cheered. The billionaire had fallen, but she had risen, not just as a survivor, but as a symbol of hope, empowerment, and the unbreakable human spirit. And though her journey was far from over, one thing was certain. The woman who had faced piranhas, wealth, and cruelty had changed the game forever. The final act began quietly, but with immense tension. The billionaire, once untouchable and feared, now sat in his grand office, alone, facing the consequences of his own actions. Investigators had pored over every document, every hidden account, and every illegal deal. The media circled like hawks, and the public had already made its judgment through viral outrage. He was a man stripped of power, pride, and respect, reduced to a shell of arrogance that once ruled an empire. Meanwhile, the maid moved with precision. She had already ensured that all evidence was documented, that every witness had been heard, and that justice could not be manipulated or ignored. She didn't gloat. This wasn't about revenge. It was about balance, truth, and showing the world that cruelty had limits, and courage had strength beyond imagination. Her calm demeanor, sharp mind, and unshakable confidence had brought the billionaire to his knees long before the final legal verdicts. On the day of the final hearing, the mansion was transformed into a center of public attention. Cameras lined the streets, reporters streamed live, and millions watched online as the billionaire, once a figure of fear, faced his reckoning. The maid arrived, composed, dressed simply, yet radiating authority. The crowd, the press, and even former elites who had once mocked her looked on with awe. She had become more than a survivor. She was a symbol of unyielding justice. The billionaire tried to plead, tried to charm, and even attempted subtle threats, but the evidence was overwhelming. Every secret he had buried was now public knowledge. Every exploitative deal, every act of arrogance, and every cruelty he had inflicted on the powerless was revealed in excruciating detail. The judge, the jury, and the public were all watching, and there was no room left for deception or denial. When the verdict came, it was decisive. The billionaire faced not only criminal charges, but the collapse of everything he had built on fear, deceit, and exploitation. His assets were seized, lawsuits mounted, and his reputation lay in ruins. The viral video of the piranha pool, once a moment of horror, had become a historical symbol of courage prevailing over arrogance. And the MAID, standing tall, had orchestrated it all with the quiet precision of a master strategist. Outside, crowds erupted in applause, cheering for the woman who had faced danger without flinching and had turned fear into power. Journalists rushed to interview her, asking how she had managed to survive, fight back, and triumph over a billionaire who thought he could control everyone. She smiled gently, her words calm but impactful. "I didn't do it for fame. I did it because no one should live in fear of cruelty. Courage and truth are stronger than wealth and arrogance, and justice will always find its way." The billionaire, humiliated and powerless, was escorted from the mansion under heavy security. The piranha pool, a silent witness to the start of this story, glistened in the sunlight, now a symbol not of fear, but of the turning tide, the rise of justice, and the triumph of human resilience. From that day forward, the maid's life transformed in ways she had never imagined. She became a public figure, admired and respected across the nation. She used her newfound platform to mentor, inspire, and support those who had no voice, sharing lessons about courage, strategy, and resilience. Schools, organizations, and even governments invited her to speak, and her story became a blueprint for facing injustice with intelligence and bravery. Yet, despite all the fame and recognition, she remained humble. She remembered the fear, the danger, and the piranha pool, the moment when survival depended not just on courage, but on skill, patience, and determination. That memory kept her grounded, reminding her that the greatest power lay not in wealth, but in wisdom, integrity, and the strength to stand up for what is right. The billionaire faded from public view, a cautionary tale whispered in elite circles about arrogance, cruelty, and the woman who had dared to stand up to him. Meanwhile, she became a beacon of hope, showing the world that no matter how insurmountable the odds, courage and strategy could overcome even the most formidable adversaries. And though her story had captured the world's attention, she knew the true victory was in the everyday victories, the confidence of those she inspired, the safety of those she protected, and the knowledge that one person, acting with intelligence and bravery, could change the course of lives and even topple empires. As she walked past the piranha pool one last time, the sunlight glinting off the water, she smiled quietly. It was over. Fear had been transformed into power, cruelty into justice, and her journey, from survival to legendary status, had left an indelible mark on the world. The mansion, the billionaire, the viral videos, they were all chapters in a story of courage, and she had written the ending. The crowd, millions online and offline, watched and celebrated. They cheered not for wealth, not for power, but for the strength of a single human being who refused to be broken. And as she disappeared into the sunset, her legacy was clear. Bravery, intelligence, and resilience could defeat even the darkest of cruelty. The world would never forget her, the woman who had turned a piranha pool into a stage for justice, and who had proven that no one, no matter how powerful, was untouchable when faced with courage and truth.